I wanted to slow this down a little bit and start tying in a few really big ideas and some things about what exactly my mission here is to do and what to wake you up to. And I realized that there's a deeper message. I want to be able to wake you up to the foundation of what true love requires. Naivete is the basis of the modern dating scene, and I've noticed that most people think that, they're off the hook from a list of complexes, and they're off the hook from a list of their traumas, and that they're off the hook because they managed to somehow get away from it, and that they found their answer. If you found your answer, you're fucked. And so I was thinking about this on a drive the other day, which is, there is no answer. There's just more questions. That's the point of paradise. It's not the resolution. It's not the end-all, be-all. It's the beginning of play. And being able to create that in your day-to-day is very important. And you could tell a dead person when they stop learning how to do that. There's been a lot of very interesting stories that have come up, and I believe that I just want to start off with the first one, is that I recognize that if most people are not willing to accept what the ideal requires, then they become naive to its value. Now, you don't really value anything that you don't quite understand, that you don't quite see, and it's perhaps maybe you do have an ideal of your life. And I noticed that we typically do have an ideal of our life, and this is for people that have the value of family, and that's a really important value to have, and it's because when you see the manifestation of your love, you see unity, the manifestation of a family perhaps, and you also see yourself in the image. Now, my whole life I've spent this image I've seen, this true love I've seeked, and I've noticed that the basis of it is going to be through reality. These dreams tend to be real, and I've noticed that the dreams are truly real when you are willing to invite reality that is in direct opposition of them existing, somehow simultaneously confirms that they are more than just dreams, or they are callings. And there's a certain point where you could really see the person, and perhaps maybe fate is a calling for the individual to rise up. The Star Wars films do a good job of that, the chosen one's supposed to be Vader, or supposed to be Anakin, but he sidesteps the responsibility of it, and he succumbs to perhaps his darkness, and that means that he didn't really integrate it, because he was hanging around a lot of puritanistic Jedis, right? And this sounds familiar, doesn't it? And then, of course, there's Luke, and he's getting a little bit of that puritanistic Jedi ideology, but the thing is that Obi-Wan dies. Well, what do you got? You got to find your own way, you're lost. And he was lost, and perhaps maybe he was never going to be enough as a Jedi unless he was willing to perhaps maybe accept that he has to face his dark side, and that was his father, and the denial of that is something that's so challenging. And so you see this vision of your life and what you want to create for it, and there's a family, and then you're a father or you're a mother, and you have children, and they're respectable, and you have a man that you love and you desire, and there's passion, and there's beauty beyond just perhaps maybe just your own connection, but there's a connection to life, and that's a manifestation of it, and you guys have this dance, and you don't just share that with each other, you bring it into the world, and you're playing with one another, and you're teaching each other a little bit about each other day to day, and the guises by which you go about it are honest and truthful, and the foundation is real. If that's not what you're aspiring towards, then you're shooting for the middle. And I've had ideals that weren't ideals, and when I recognized that, I was like, I'm hardly dreaming. White picket fence, 2 kids, Midwestern wife. No jabs against Midwestern women. I'm just saying that there's a particular culture that we have that loves the idea of a dog, 2 kids, and a husband with a vasectomy, and I don't feel that any of those things are rich. I've noticed that was a big point in my life, but I've noticed that I've always had this ideal, and I was really afraid of everything that challenged it. And when we say we have an ideal, we also have a dream, and we have a dream of our lives. And when we accept that we have a dream of our lives, you have to begin to show up to the nightmare of your life. You don't create a beautiful life by avoiding everything about reality that challenges it. In fact, you become educated to the necessity of what you need to face about life in order to have it. So, think of it this way. Fortification is the answer. We're not here to diminish. We're here to fortify. And if we're here to fortify, that means that every incorporation of the things that you don't quite understand is going to be the beginning of the person you want to become. So healing is not the removal of, it is the incorporation of a little bit more in direction of. And so a lot of the time we like to avoid certain things about ourselves. And I kind of noticed that, like, if you were born a Catholic, you have symbols in your head you can't get rid of. Maybe a Jew, You have symbols in your head you can't get rid of. A Buddhist, you have symbols in your head you can't get rid of. And there's something really interesting about how the subconscious and the soul speaks to us. And you could say they're a little bit related to each other. It's through everything in your life and how you developed. You know, your childhood home is more than just your home on the boardwalk or wherever you lived. Your dreams are more than just, a few little flashes of images. The sum total of your life is more than just how your ego identifies with it. And so perhaps maybe the beginning of wisdom, or to open yourself up, is to recognize how your ego identifies with particular symbols that exist outside of your identity, but your identity uses them to help you access things of universality. And now that's the incorporation of the divine in your humanity, because that's the very basis of how you interact with it. And so I've always had a deep desire for love. My whole life I've had a deep desire for love, and I still feel that so deeply in my heart now. And you could say, well, what's the difference? Well, I'll tell you something. I grew up. The desire remained. The dream is there. And the more I grow up, the more I recognize what I need to face about reality. And despair used to be a lot of my mode of operation. And when I realized that I was always hit with despair when reality came down my door, I recognized that I ran from reality. And that didn't make the true love exist. That made me a perpetrator who looked to enforce his own ideology onto those who are willing to accept it. I was not a liberator. I was a tyrant. And of course, in my own head, I'm a lonely guy who's looking for love. Why can't I just? And it's like, please get rid of all of those things. Let's start actually asking the real question. Who are you? And that became really damn clear to me when I fell in love for the first time. Or at least what I thought was love. One of my favorite questions is, especially when I hear that with people, I love this person. And it's like, well, let's really challenge your interpretation of love, because I think you like more of what they can validate about yourself that you don't like about you. So let's actually completely get rid of your definition of it. Let's start incorporating a new one. Love is being able to see everything that person comes with, and then to be able to identify the person collectively with those things. So it's not just so much the characteristics that somebody has that you love. It's their consciousness of those characteristics, and not just their consciousness of their characteristics. It's what they direct those things towards. That's a good person. That's someone you could love. No, love is not through running. It's not through hiding. In fact, it's through seeing and facing and seeing, and you continue to do that. And so I had this ideal of my life, and I noticed that being raised religious made it a lot stronger than I thought it would ever be. This is true for a lot of people who have that foundation. They want a family, but you're part of a secular world, and that challenges everything about that. And it exposes you to things that you desire that you're not so comfortable desiring. So I like this one, and it's the beauty of opposition is that you get to come closer to the connection of what's truly true. A little redundancy, truly true, yeah. Well, yeah, it's an absolute, and we often feel that, truth is a particular answer, and it's like, no, that's a conclusion. That's the end of the discovery of truth and its eternity. No, if you could perhaps maybe just accept it as it comes in, and maybe the nature of your game changes, and then now truth no longer becomes something that you jump on. It becomes something you live with, and something you speak with. And then you could say that's the incorporation of God in your life. And I absolutely think that's true. And I've noticed the most godless of people are the most religious. And I've also noticed that the most imprisoned individuals are the most liberated. And it's interesting to me because I've noticed that most people who hide under the guises of liberation and they kind of adopt the secular ideology are the ones that never have anything that could build outside of their hedonistic short-term behaviors. And it's, of course, well, then you take the religious person, there's a little bit of a prison there. Well, if they're not fully religious, an integrated individual can be religious. And I think that's a really good differentiation there, is that most people in the religious world, in this sense, as somebody who is religious, are more concerned of how other people are going to perceive their authentic behavior than they actually are connected to their values that are so to be from God. And it's like, you really can't say that you care about your life unless you've really investigated everything that you live your life by. And it's like, well, why? Because maybe what you're upholding is actually not helping you grow. And so what good are your virtues? Right now, from June 1st to June 14th, we are having a half-off giveaway as a celebration for our 200K subscribers, thanks to you guys. The work that we do here is going to be a little bit different than what you've seen on YouTube. This is going to be all of my private content that I do with my clients that I work with in my groups for men and for women, and you get to be a part of that yourself. We have bi-weekly Q&As with me face-to-face, about an hour long, so you get to integrate the material that you have from the groups. Along with that, you get to be a part of those groups that are uploading live. You can also go back to the library that we have, and I can actually help you personally integrate the material with the problem that you have, and we could transform together. If this is you, go ahead, click the link below, get that lifetime offer, and I'll see you on the other side. So I remember being a very young kid and having this vision of my life. And more reality of what I saw challenged the absolute hell of that existing. And now, it challenged its existence. Not because it rejected it, but it demanded me to grow, to recognize what was in opposition was actually for it. Now that's called growing up. Being able to recognize that as I got older, I heard things about my father in the beginning of my mother's marriage. Ooh, maybe I'm a many woman kind of guy. Huh. Well, I don't like that. I could just reject it, right? Back to fairy tale, back to fantasy. And now what does love become? It becomes a fantasy. And I'm sure you've heard the jaded bitter type say that. Well, then I recognize more things about my childhood development and how it's affected me and how it's created behavior that's dysfunctional. And what's underlying is dark. And the darker it gets, the more it challenges that ideal, and it starts to shake and it gets a little foggy. And then I start to experience doubt. And contrary to what everybody thinks, doubt's going to be the very thing that gets you close to the truth. If you don't have that in your room, then you're probably not actually talking with the truth. You're just holding on to a prior conviction of what you know. And really, the truth is constantly expanding. So it demands you to go into the unknown. So if you live a truthful life, then you don't just live a life based off of your first perception of it. It evolves and it grows. But here's the thing. It was initially what was. And so if you look at it like a seed, and that seed grows into a tree, and that tree grows tall and strong, and its roots go deep and down, and those branches touch heaven, that's what truth looks like. And most people have what you call something that allows them to avoid a part of themselves that challenges their ideal. And then they become a delusional, fantasy-oriented person who never grows or develops. And the process of creating a dream is not the avoidance of reality, and perhaps maybe the reality about ourselves, not just you as Jonathan or as Veronica or as whatever your name is, but as mankind, humanity. And so I've noticed that often, you discover things about yourself, and maybe you analyze the things about yourself, which is very different than experiencing the things about yourself, because experiencing the things about yourself are shame-inducing. Who wants to do that on a Tuesday? Well, nobody would want to do any of these things unless they had meaning or connection to their life. Well, also, let's be real, what's really driving you? And I spoke about that in the last video, which is you better have a drive for truth. Oh my God, what you're welcoming is the pit. What you're welcoming is betrayal. What you're welcoming is disaster. And I mean, that's going to be the way that your brain perceives it. And maybe you should accept that your brain will perceive these things that way, because you've never really seen the courage of your heart. And that's a different dimension of your existence outside of your bad experiences. And if you got rid of your bad experiences and didn't accept the implications that maybe they'll repeat, then you'll never really get to see your courage, but also your faith. And so now we're starting to open up the dimensions of the person. And so when I was younger, I would see these parts of me, and I would feel that every time I was incorporating more truth, I'd be further and further away from that ideal. I'd look more and more about my inadequacies, my insecurities, my insufficiencies. What I've come to recognize now at this point in my life, that's 25 years young, is that if it comes knocking, open the door. And when it opens the door and it's something that you don't quite understand, have it sit down, feed it, interact with it, relate to it. The truth will be revealed. And a person that's lived a truthful life has the momentum of being able to incorporate more of it. And they get to experience the beauty of their life through a facing of its truth and the reality that comes with it. A person that disconnects themselves from what reality comes with is always making decisions away from responsibility. What if you could experience the grace of God? What if you could experience His kindness? What if you could experience His light, His mercy, without trying to avoid your darkness? The beauty of this is now no longer one where the ideal disintegrates in the face of everything about reality. It's the very thing that makes the dream reality. And I've noticed this for myself, especially because as I've been doing more and more of this, whatever this is called living. That's actually what it's called. Is that my dreams are reflective of my life. My life is reflective of my dreams. And I've also begun to realize that the more truth I incorporate in my life, the less I run from it. Perhaps sometimes truth can challenge the ideal that we seek. But maybe one day we could start recognizing the beauty of our life is how we show up to its unideal existence. I spoke to one of my clients recently, and it was a very rich conversation. And it went a little bit like this.
Hey, Naftali, I feel I'm not where I'm supposed to be. I'm not with the girls I want to be or the girl that I want to be with. I'm not in the job that I want to have. And I said, yeah, of course not. All I've heard is that you shouldn't be here. And you say it 3 times in every different place. And so I said, here's what you're telling me. I'm not here, I'm not here, and I'm not here. Are you present for your life? And he sat back into his chair, whatever he was doing, because it was over the phone. He said, Naftali, I want to give you a hug. I feel like a fucking idiot. I've been running from my life for 27 years. It's right before my eyes. I've been interacting with how it should be. I never even got to meet my life as it is. And so perhaps maybe if you meet your life as it is, it will challenge that ideal, but perhaps maybe you can direct your attention to what's reality. When we direct our attention to what's reality, we tend to become involved. And when we're involved with life, it's almost like we start to build the dream through it. We're not so focused in the mind anymore. We're in our state of being. And it's like, ooh, you don't know how rich that is. And I want you to recognize this. And I'll leave you with this one last note. You change when you accept a state of being. That's when you become. When you accept a state of being, you give up on performance and you start recognizing the kind of person you can be outside of the stage you need to go on. And you could even say that every person has their stage. Every person has their moment. Every individual will stand before whatever is their perceived crowd in their tens, thousands, hundreds of thousands, whatever it may be. And they'll spread a message. And it's because we all have a message to share. When we get so caught up in the performance, and this is something that I noticed about performance, is that performance is what the audience recognizes, but truly somebody who's being. Yeah. The performance is what the audience sees, when really what they're looking at is someone who's being. And I've recognized that if you perform and you succeed, you're held hostage by your performance and your state of being diminishes. And so the thing about being that I find is very beautiful is that maybe you're not ready to get on the stage. There's a life for you to face. And I know this even as a speaker. You start performing, you're forgetting, you're not being. And a representation of being is what changed the world. The performance is a confirmation that you're not enough. Being means that I have agreed to make the sacrifices in order to come close to an expression that is a perceived performance to you, but truly is an expression of the soul and the collective humanity divine interacting as one. And that's what we call humanity. The animal and the divine interacting as one is humanity. So I told him, doesn't that sound like a dream where you wake up in the morning, where you can be? And all it requires you to do is to show up to your life the way that it is, and to take those commitments and to go deeper with them. To go deeper with them until it becomes a state of being. I recognize to be somebody who's really looking for true love, you need to be an embodiment of what that really looks like. And that means you need to be courageous. I'm liking this place a lot because I'm recognizing that there's so much more. And the performance was the elimination of that. It stopped me from seeking, from learning. And I realized that when you're really learning, the ideal no longer becomes the pursuit. You begin to face your life with a connection to what's right. And you don't just shape an ideal. You start realizing the dream was manifested under your feet. And you didn't even try. So the dream was a manifestation of being that's going to happen in relationship to reality that comes knocking on your door. Right now, from June 1st to June 14th, we are having a half-off giveaway as a celebration for our 200K subscribers, thanks to you guys. The work that we do here is going to be a little bit different than what you've seen on YouTube. This is going to be all of my private content that I do with my clients that I work with in my groups for men and for women, and you get to be a part of that yourself. We have bi-weekly Q&As with me face-to-face, about an hour long, so you get to integrate the material that you have from the groups. Along with that, you get to be a part of those groups that are uploading live. You can also go back to the library that we have
and I can actually help you personally integrate the material with the problem that you have, and we could transform together. If this is you, go ahead, click the link below, get that lifetime offer, and I'll see you on the other side.